So I just kind of rage posted on LinkedIn that like it was really unfair that women were held to this crazy standard of like just knowing all the answers and being so organized and keeping everybody else organized and being the adult in the room and doing the housekeeping stuff in meetings, but also like having the strategy. And then I kind of just went to bed. And then I woke up the next morning and like it hadn't gone like viral, but it was viral enough where there were like a lot of people that were like, yes, this is correct. And so I just kind of like threw all these people into a Slack community and it took off really fast. And it got up above 1,000 people within like a month.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PlayBridge podcast. Today, we're joined by Mallory Contois. She leads community at Mercury and is the founder of the Old Girls Club, a virtual community for women in the second and third stages of their careers in male-dominated fields. She is also an angel investor and advisor to early-stage founders, focusing on those building in consumer social, art and creativity, women's health, and marketplaces. Mallory previously spent time on the early teams at Pinterest and Cameo, focusing on product-led growth, and as the COO of Medify, a marketplace for gamers to find community and master their skills. Mallory, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That bio is too long.
Very impressive bio. That leads me perfectly into my first question. So you've had like a pretty cool range of career experiences working in big tech, working with startups, building your own community. So can you just start off by sharing like what was your first career move after college and how did you make your different pivots throughout your career?
Totally. I'm such a serial career pivoter. So I love this question. So out of college, I was a psychology major at Duke, and I had actually always intended to become a therapist. That was my post-grad plan. And I had applied to a bunch of PhD programs. I was going to do child and teen psychology. And I got to the end and I looked at myself as like a 21-year-old and I was like, in what world am I ready to be like giving, like telling anyone how to live? And so I just didn't feel ready. And so I kind of last minute, like panic adjusted and was like, all right, I know I want to live in New York. I know I'm interested in like psychology, and I had done some internships in like advertising and things like that. And I kind of just like put out the like alarm signal to be like, does anybody have a job for me? And I graduated in 2012. So the job market was like, okay at the time. It had kind of rebounded. And a friend of mine who had been a year older than me at Duke was working at a company called 33 Across, which was a early stage ad tech company in the age of like when online ads were really just sort of starting to be a real thing, which I know for a lot of people listening, that seems like probably insane, but that was not that long ago. I'm not that old. And so I kind of just fell into it. It was a very like burgeoning field at the time. And I was really good with data and I really understood people and I understood advertising and I was just like a hard worker. And so I took sort of a generalist, like operations data, like do whatever you need kind of role. And just like kind of worked my butt off there for a few months, but it was kind of a mess also. So at the time, it was an early stage company and like things were going well, but I was like, I don't know if this is like how being an adult is supposed to feel. And then a bunch of people started leaving and I kind of panicked, but I followed a woman who I really deeply respected and still do. Her name is Corinne Roman. And I followed her to LinkedIn. And that's really kind of what started my path in what was sort of big tech at the time, but always kind of skewing earlier and earlier stage throughout the rest of my career.
What was the role at LinkedIn?
I think my first role there was campaign manager. So it was really taking like, this was the time, this always feels so wild to talk about. This was the time when we were like hard coding Boolean logic for how to serve ads on the internet. So I was literally behind the scenes saying, okay, we want to serve this ad to this like subset of the LinkedIn audience. And so I'm going to write the Boolean logic that like applies to this group of people. So like this person needs to fit this criteria and this criteria or this criteria, et cetera, et cetera. and then I would deliver those ads. And it's so bizarre because like, obviously that is terrifying that like 23-year-old Mallory was like, like, managing all of these campaigns. But it was a great job because I just learned so much and it was really cross-functional. So I was working with sales teams, I was working with engineering, I was working with, all sorts of folks at the company.
What was your experience going from like crazy, chaotic startup environment to big tech?
To be fair, LinkedIn wasn't like huge at the time. So I was in our New York office and there were about 30 of us. So we were a smaller part of like a pretty large organization, most of which was centered out in Sunnyvale in San Francisco. But like being in different cities like really meant you were in different cities at the time. Like we didn't have Zoom. We weren't really like, we were kind of working with each other, but it was totally different from now. And so it still kind of felt like we were a small group, even though we had a lot more resources than I was used to and things were a lot more organized and I like got onboarded and, but I think at the time early in my career, I was like, this feels better. Like, this feels like this is a real job. Like I have things to do and like, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And like, there's performance reviews. And so I think overall for my mindset, I had gone through so much uncertainty for a little bit after graduating that I was like, okay, this is nice. Like there's some organization here.
I've also had a crazy, chaotic startup experience, and it's just like, is this allowed? Was like often crossing my mind, which is scary.
Every startup experience I had after that was also chaotic and crazy, and I chose it time after time after time. But I think I just was like not ready at that part of my career.
Yeah. Yeah. What draws you to the chaotic startup life? And also, what advice do you have for others that might be navigating a more chaotic work environment?
I always like to tell people you have to like find an environment that suits you. Like, I don't think you can't like, what is it? Square peg round hole yourself into a working environment. And as I got older and had more experience, I learned I have very severe ADHD and I'm like actually pretty introverted. And so I sort of swing too far the other way sometimes. And I can be really intense, like with other people, just because I'm sort of compensating for my own discomfort or burnout or whatever it is. And so in super sort of like organized traditional environments, people are like, what is this energy that's coming from you? Whereas in an early stage company, it gets interpreted as like, she's a hustler, she's working so hard, she's like, seems like she's everywhere, she's curious, she's like, and so I sort of found that it was the path of least resistance for me because I was seen as like a superstar in these like early chaotic environments because I was able to pay attention to so much at once and like gather a bunch of information. And I've always been a pretty good communicator. And so I was able to kind of pull all that chaos in, internalize it, organize it, and then like present it to people in a way that made them feel very taken care of by me and like they trusted me. And having wanted to have been a therapist at some point in my life, that felt really good. Having people say that I was helping make their days easier and their jobs easier and that I was, a positive sort of light in this like chaotic, scary sometimes environment. And so I think over time, I really just grew it. Like that became my personality in a lot of ways was like, how do I enter into these spaces and make people feel safer? And a lot of times that was me figuring out how to solve problems either alongside them or on their behalf and then translating that over to them. But I don't know. I love the chaos. I think I get bored so fast that like if new stuff isn't happening every day, I'm kind of like, what else can I be doing? So it was that early stage was just always a better fit for me.
Same. I also love the chaos. So bring us to today. You lead Old Girls Club. You also are head of community at Mercury. And you advise startups. So what led you to this point and why do you like kind of having this multifaceted career?
Yeah. And I'm teaching a Reforge course starting this week.
Oh, yes, I saw that actually.
We're adding another thing to the list, just because why not? And I'm getting married in October. So,
amazing.
We're busy.
A lot happening.
Yeah. So I think that I get bored and that's okay. Like, I think throughout my life, I was always told that was a bad thing. Like, the good employee really was like focused and didn't job switch and didn't like cause ripples or didn't, whatever. I really had to rewrite that narrative for myself where that's actually my superpower. I think that curiosity, that desire to jump around and do a bunch of things, because the more things I'm able to expose myself to, the better I become at each of them because I have so much more context. The only reason I'm able to teach a Reforge course is because I've been at a million early stage companies and worked with a million early stage founders. And so I can help people avoid mistakes and potholes and things like that. And so reframing that narrative for myself, which is like, it's okay that you get bored as long as you figure out the right way to structure your days and your time where I'm never sacrificing the quality of the work that I'm doing, has really enabled me to build this cool, I call it a portfolio career. I think that term's like starting to float around a little bit more. But I have loved that concept. And I love the idea of having these sort of like grounding values and these things that I know that I care about and that I love and that I'm really good at. And then choosing activities, some of which I make money from, some of which I get a ton of like personal fulfillment from, some of which are just fun, and like kind of pulling all of those in a really well constructed way. It's almost like creating your own sort of P&L or operating plan, right? Like every company is running, if you think about a marketing plan, you have a bunch of stuff going on at once and you're figuring out how much to invest in each one at each time. And it is dynamic and it changes. And that's kind of how I view a lot of it. So, each thing sort of brings a different element of stuff that I love. Like the Reforge course, I'm really excited about because I just I miss teaching and I love helping other people learn. And I just have a lot in my brain that I feel like I want to get out. Leading the Old Girls Club it started as just a full passion project that now happens to be a second income stream for me, but is just so incredibly fulfilling. And I feel like I'm just cheating the system all the time because I have this insanely amazing community behind me. Where and then my role at Mercury, I work with some of the smartest people and just incredibly good at their jobs. And the product is amazing. And it keeps me grounded in a schedule and in a team. And I get that team mentality. So, everything kind of contributes in different ways. The advising is often just because I meet somebody that I really believe in and just want to be helpful. And that feels more like a casual hobby to me than anything. And wedding planning, I'm kind of locked in on. So,
I was literally just talking to my friend. Wedding planning is another full-time job.
Oh
It's
God,
honestly
totally. And
insane.
I don't have a planner because
then it's really a full-time job.
I just know I would be such a pain in the ass for a planner to deal with. And I would be it would just be annoying to have to listen to someone else's idea. And I know that about myself. So, it's fine.
I got married last year and I needed a planner because I was the wedding won't happen if I don't hire someone to do this. So
I had the advantage of, because I run so many events and things like that for work, that it's pretty I'm almost looking at it.
Know where to start.
Totally. And our LA wedding is almost like a brand activation. It's not that different. It's just a huge party. And then the New York one's 35 people. It's like a dinner party. No big deal.
Love that. Love that. Amazing. Okay, so before we get too far ahead, first of all, love the concept of a career portfolio. Dive in a little bit deeper on each of your current roles, things that you're up to, paint a bit more of a picture for us, and then how do you think about how each of those are kind of contributing to your career portfolio?
So I think the first thing you have to start with is it's hard to do a bunch of different things and then try to find the common thread. It's possible. But I think often what happens is you start to sort of sense this common thread that you're really drawn to, and then you can start to pick through opportunities and choose and prioritize the ones that fit under that criteria. So for me, it's always been about, I'm really, really passionate about empowering underrepresented groups, particularly entrepreneurs, professional women, just people that don't have the same built-in access points. And it's always just been fun for me to buck the system. So that's a thing that I just love. And I'm also I'm to back up a tiny bit and give you a little bit of context, I'm the daughter of a doctor and like an artist, basically. And so that's always been this sort of push-pull for me, where I'm very tactical and thought, and like I was like a math and science kid and whatever, but my mom is just this like free spirit who always taught me, like I definitely have so much of that like creativity from her. And so it's always been about how do I blend those things in a way where I feel like myself and I don't feel like I'm like acting a part. Because if I go too far either way, I start to be like a characterization of one of them and not like the actual version of myself. So that's the other piece of that like portfolio concept for me, is how do I feed those different pieces in a way where I don't feel like I'm neglecting one side or the other or like a particular part of myself. So to dive into each one a little bit. So the Old Girls Club is a community I started coming out of COVID. It was 2022, beginning of 2022, but certainly still feeling isolated. And I had just recently closed a Series A with the CEO of the company that I was the COO for, which is Medify. And it was a frustrating experience as a woman. I generally felt pretty ignored by our investors, and not, if they're watching, not the ones that invested, but overall. And I was feeling really alone. There are certain things that you just can't express to your coworkers or to the people directly around you, namely when you don't know what you're doing. And so like one of those things was like, we had raised this $25 million round, and then it was up to me to like budget it. And I was like, in what world do I know what to do with $25 million? That's insane. But it's literally my job to know. And I couldn't really be like, hey, like, I don't really know what to do here. And so I called up a few people who I knew would know a lot more than me. And I sort of noticed that the people I felt comfortable calling were all women. They were all women who were more senior, who had been through this sort of experience. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I didn't do that intentionally, but I just felt more comfortable reaching out to them and like admitting that I didn't know what was going on. And I think that's a very systemic thing. I think women in general, particularly in tech, we're sort of expected to show up and have all the answers. And I think it's because we feel that we just have to perform at a higher level a lot of the times to earn the respect in the room and to move up, particularly in technical roles. So I was like, hey, like, I don't know, would it be crazy if we all got in a Slack community or like a Slack channel? And they were like, no. And then this is maybe a story for another time, but I I got drunk at my parents' house between Christmas and New Year's that year. And it's that weird time of year, where you're like, you're like, everything is weird. The world is like fucked up. I'm full of cheese. And like, I'm at my parents' house. I'm in like my childhood bedroom. Why? And so I just kind of rage posted on LinkedIn that like, it was really unfair that women were held to this crazy standard of like, just knowing all the answers and being so organized and keeping everybody else organized and being the adult in the room and doing the housekeeping stuff in meetings, but also like having the strategy. And then I kind of just went to bed. And then I woke up the next morning and like, it hadn't gone like viral, but it was viral enough where there were like a lot of people that were like, yes, this is correct.
It resonated.
Totally. Yeah. And so I was like, all right, a little bit panicked. I actually called my fiance, and who was like, I'd been dating him for like 3 months at the time. And I was like, I think I messed up. And he was like, I think it seems fine. Like, just what's the problem? Like, just try it. Classic, like, dude, he's like, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Just try it. It'll be great. And so I just kind of like threw all these people into a Slack community, and it took off really fast. And it got up above 1,000 people within like a month. And I was the COO of a company that had just raised $25 million at the time. And I was like, I don't have time. This is like, I'm way in over my head. I can't do this. So I swapped it to a paid community, mostly to cut down the number of people and to sort of enforce just a level of like participation where it wasn't on me to kind of like own everything. It forced this sort of like commitment to the community, and it started to kind of take a life on of its own. It was just $10 a month or $100 a year, and that's still what it is. And it's less about money and more about people saying like, this is worth $10 a month of my time and energy to like get stuff from this community, but also to give back. And so anyway, it's been a little over 2 years now, and I think we are nearly 1,500 members now, which is pretty wild. And 1,500, while it felt huge then, feels like the amazing perfect size now. And it's because we did slow growth, and I never took money from investors or anything like that. I always really just wanted it to be a super safe space that people could come to and exist in, and it'd be a happy corner of the internet. So that's that. Mercury, so fast forward 7 or 8 months from the story I just told, and I stepped down from my role as COO of that company. Reason being is that the company, the founder, Josh, if you're watching this, Josh really recommitted to a long-term play in the gaming industry. And we had raised, and I had joined sort of on the idea of a multi-vertical future for the platform. I'm not an adult gamer. I gamed as a kid, but it's just not an industry that I feel really passionately about. And I just couldn't get behind being a COO of an early stage company in an industry I wasn't passionate about. There was that. And also Josh was like one of my best friends, and I really cared about that relationship. And so I stepped down before it got to the point where it had to be something different. He's officiating our wedding. Like, that's how close we were and still are. And so when I left, I had actually intended to take some time off. I was planning on taking 6 months to just sort of like do some advising, maybe do some consulting, like fix my nervous system a little bit. Like, I had been on a decade-long early stage startup roller coaster from Pinterest to Compass to Cameo to Medify. And I was exhausted. But then sort of the tech ecosystem kind of started to collapse, right? That was the end of 2023. And, or no, the end of 2022 still. Man, time is a construct. End of 2022, tech ecosystem starts to really get weird. Layoffs are starting. Fundraising is drying up. And as much as I would have loved to take a break, I'm not like old enough or wealthy enough to just like chill for 2 years, and like the horizon of finding a role at that time was starting to look longer and longer, especially for somebody like me who's sort of a specific hire. Like I can't just like raise my hand and like be an account manager. It's hard, like I really need to find the right thing. And so at the time, this Mercury role popped up and I saw it. And honestly, I had no business applying for it. Like, my only qualification for this role was that I had started OGC. Every role ahead of that had been product, operations strategy, like super technical, finance, legal, HR, like the real like innards of the business. And the role at Mercury is very much not that. And I didn't know anybody at the company. And so I I emailed the head of recruiting at Andreessen, who was one of our investors. And I had like a light connection to her through somebody else. I was like, hey, we both worked at Pinterest a long time ago. You don't know me, but I really want this job. And like, here's 4 bullets of why like I am actually the person for this job. I know I don't look like it on paper. Like, I know my LinkedIn is like totally inappropriate for this job, but like, here's 4 bullets, send it to the hiring manager. Like, if they say no, no big deal. But like, I really think I'm the person that they need for this job. And I interviewed the next week and they hired me like the week after. So it was like kind of a quick thing and it was sort of unexpected. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm at a bank now. Like I'm leading community at a bank. Like, this is such a weird left turn. But I've never really like cared too much about that. And I always like the fun of like learning something new. And just a good old pivot. We love a pivot around here. I knew I was going to learn a bunch. And so, yeah, I started there in January of 2023. So just after the holidays. And I've been there for about 18 months now.
I mean, in my mind, you are the perfect person for this role.
Well, it looks like that now, right? But yeah. 18 months ago was definitely a stretch.
What do you think they were, like, looking at the job description, like, what do you think they were on paper looking for that you did not have? Because I think community is also like this hot new role.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Like 2 years ago, the word community, but the word community was so loaded and like, honestly, I think people have really commandeered it to mean something totally different than what it's meant to mean. I think on paper or internally, at least, they were like, all right, we see our competitors, they have like community teams and they're doing a bunch of events and they're doing all this stuff. And like, it's very, it's very visible. We should be doing something like that too. And we had a great events team, but it didn't feel like of the community. It was very kind of like top down. Here is something we're presenting to you if you want to come. And so I think they sort of expected to get somebody that would come in and be a little bit more events heavy. But because my background is product and because I know the founder so well, I came in and I was like, founders don't want more. Like they don't need more free drinks.
They're tired.
Like,
they want to
so
focus on their job.
They don't want more small talk. They don't want more free drinks. They'll go on the yacht, but like they don't need it, And I was like, instead, I really think we can like invest some of our resources into building tools and programs that are lightweight for them, but like high ROI. And that's going to feel much more of the people and of the community to them because it shows that we understand where they're at.
Yeah.
So it took me like a little while to socialize that and kind of shepherd the move from I think what they thought they were getting to what I ended up being. And also SVB collapsed 3 months after I started. So that threw a little wrench in things. But yeah, it's been great. It's been so fun. And I get to build things that help the people that I love helping anyway, but I get the resources of like a pretty successful, like well-loved brand. So it's been a really fun journey, a very like unexpectedly fun journey.
So, okay, tell us more about if you're a member of OGC, like what do you get, what's going on in that community? And then also tell us more about what you're providing for the community at Mercury and how you kind of like think about these communities differently.
It's funny. The folks on my team at Mercury would laugh at this question because I try a lot of stuff with OGC and then I take the stuff that works and I like just adjust it to whatever it needs at Mercury.
Perfect person for the job.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so for members in OGC, the primary experience is a very asynchronous one. And I built it very deliberately that way. As I mentioned earlier, I'm an introvert myself. I don't love events. I get really exhausted and I don't find that I get a ton of ROI out of them. Also, women are busy, especially successful women or people that are senior in roles or they're in their second and third phases of their career. Like to ask them to show up for 2 hours, like in an evening is such a massive ask that it's almost impossible to have a positive ROI from an event like that for them,
Could not agree more.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right, there's gotta be a different approach. And so I had experienced Reddit and I was like, Reddit's like conceptually helpful, but like scary in practice a lot of the time. How great would it be if we had sort of like a community driven Reddit for women who needed answers, who needed help, and combining that with the sort of concept of the old boys club. So we're not anti-old boys club. We're not anti-men. But what we do believe is that we should have the same infrastructure as the old boys club has. And what they're really, really good at is exchanging favors really quickly. So like observationally, you'll see 2 men meet for the first time. And within 5 or 10 minutes, they're making introductions for each other or they're setting up a deal or they're whatever. With women, these are broad strokes. With women, I find that it takes a coffee date, a walk, a phone call to catch up, and then you're ready to ask for a favor. And that's beautiful that we want each other to know that like, it's not just about what I want from you. It's I care about you as a human, but it also slows us way down. And so I was like, how do we shorten the length of time from like that first interaction to like getting that exchange of value? Along with like, I have a fundamental belief that like most women's communities are too much about friendship. Hot take. I think like most women don't need that many more friends, especially once they're in their like 30s and 40s, Acquaintances are great. Like positive social experiences are great, but like we literally don't have the bandwidth for more like what we might define as friends. And so I deliberately sort of designed OGC to not be about friendship and to be more about an exchange of value. So anyway, the primary experience of the Slack community, it's very much like give and take, asking for help themed. So most of the channels are like, I need help at work. I need help with personal stuff. I need a recommendation. I need an introduction. And the community jumps in and sort of like trades favors for the most part. There's some fun channels, and there are certainly friendships that have bloomed from it, which I love. There are some events, but they're a very minor part of the experience. It was just really important to me that somebody who lived in Wisconsin didn't feel like they were missing out on a huge value prop by not being able to go to anything in person. So we do some like coffee meetups in cities and things like that. Most of them are just member organized. And then we do what I call sessions, which are community member led. So community members will raise their hand and they'll say, hey, I want to run a session on understanding equity, or I want to run a session on like important financial moves for new parents, or marketing funnels, or whatever. It can be anything from like personal topics to work topics. And they run, 30-minute or hour-long educational sessions for other members. And it's great for them. They get visibility. It's great for the members. They get to learn something from somebody else in the community. And that's become a really great sort of just engine of like people meeting each other. So this is the primary experience. It's deliberately very simple. And then there's just a biweekly newsletter as well, just to help people. Our Slack is like intense. People are really participatory, which is amazing. But I do a biweekly digest to help people keep up too, because it can get to be a little overwhelming. And then on the Mercury side, we support founders in a couple ways. We focus on fundraising, community, and mentorship. So on the fundraising side, we have a couple programs to help founders identify the best investors for them to target, as well as to have a chance for us to distribute their pitch to an investor pool that we have. We also do pitch feedback sessions and peer pitch feedback as well. On the community side, we have a Slack community. It is like quite literally OGC copied and pasted, but for founders. So again, like very much about the exchange of value, not about making friends. Founders also don't have time for friendship, really. They're really focused on getting shit done. So we run small groups that help people towards like very specific goals, and they kind of like keep each other accountable. It's cool. It's mostly for earlier stage founders. So I'd say pre-seed through A are the best fits right now. We're thinking about how to best support later stage founders, but honestly, they need community a lot less than the earlier stage founders do. And then the last piece is mentorship. We have something really fun in beta right now that's only accessible to our community, but it's going to open up in June, and we're basically opening up like asynchronous mentorship for founders. So if they have questions, they can submit them, and then we'll have a panel of operators that have been at great companies who will answer those questions for them. And then all those will go into a database that people will be able to publicly access and read as well.
What companies do you think should be investing in community? Because to our earlier point, it is like this new, buzzier role.
My definition of community is different than I think how a lot of people define it. I think the word often gets used for sales funnel. Community can look like getting all of your potential users in one place and then selling to them. And that's something we see a lot, and it's very cringy, and it usually doesn't work. Sometimes it'll get like a burst of, people will get a burst of sales, but then it kind of just peters out because it is what it is. I generally am a proponent of like show your cards sales, where it's like, don't pretend like you're not selling to some, like if you're selling, sell, and like make sure it's useful. So I actually personally like really hate that strategy, but we see it a lot. And I hate it even more when it's disguised as like, we're here to help you like connect with each other and whatever, because like that's not what you're doing. For me, I think brands that should invest in real community are ones where they have a set of users that have a clear need that they could meet for each other. So the brand is more taking the brand's resources and using them to create space where the users can help each other in some way. And sometimes that's inspiration, sometimes that's knowledge sharing, sometimes that's collaboration. But the brand, if you think about it, like the brand should be the host of the dinner party, not like going and sitting down and eating everybody else's food, or like trying to get them to sign up for their like food delivery service after their dinner party. I think brands are brands, and like people know brands have money and they know that they have resources. And so Where you can do really great work is when you take those resources and you give it to your community, and that community recognizes that and is grateful. And then often you get that sense of loyalty, that longer term commitment to your brand, as well as like a much more open feedback loop. And that can be really valuable as well. It can also build a lot more forgiveness in with your users. Like if they feel like you're human and they understand you and you've, gone out of your way to support them, if like your site goes down for a day, it's probably going to be okay. Whereas if they don't feel like they have that more personal connection, they're just going to go to your competitor. Like it just literally doesn't matter.
And I feel like this maybe plays into psychology and how you've used psychology to build a very engaged community. So, one, would love to just kind of have you unpack this. How does psychology play into building communities? And then I also believe that's what your course is going to be on.
Yes. Wow. Nice, clean segue. Yeah, for me, like psychology is kind of everything. Like it's sales, it's marketing, it's customer experience, it's product, it's engineering. Like it's really the whole part of building something new, because you're building it for humans. Like until the day comes that we're literally building things for like AI robots to buy, you're building things for humans on the other side. It doesn't matter what you're building, whether it's a B2B SaaS platform all the way down to like a CPG sunscreen. You're still selling to a human that's maybe had a good day, maybe had a bad day. Maybe they're lonely, maybe they're not. Maybe they're like having a great year. Maybe they're super depressed and having like a really, really tough time. And I just think we don't talk about that enough. And so for me, when it comes to community, I think the biggest thing I think about is like creating psychologically safe spaces. And I think like the concept of psychological safety is often used in sort of this like traumatic context of like, how do you make people feel okay when they're not? But I think psychological safety applies like no matter what you're talking about. If you think about, you're meeting a friend for coffee, there is a world where like you walk into that coffee shop and you see them and you feel like that's a very safe space for you to like unload and like be yourself, whatever. But like you can imagine an alternate version of that where you're like feeling like you're being evaluated or like you have to present in a certain way or, whatever. And that may come from how that person has treated you in the past. That may come from how they asked you to come have coffee with them. That may come from where they asked you to have coffee with. Like, there are all these things that it can be the same person, but it can feel so different to you just by sort of like the setup, the context, the surrounding environment. So for me, when I'm thinking about really anything, building a product, building an onboarding experience, building a community, it's about how do I bring the right people into that space and then make them feel comfortable and comfortable enough for me to get them to do what I want them to do. Like ultimately, when you're building something, you have an outcome, right? You have a goal for your user. Sometimes it's for them to buy something. Sometimes it's for them to feel a certain way. Sometimes it's for them to sign up, whatever. In order for them to make a decision, we mostly make decisions when we are feeling psychologically safe and comfortable, not when we're unsure or, like on edge. That's often when we're like, I'm going to come back. Like, but like, I don't know, when you go to like a sunglasses shop and they're like, how do you like them? And you're like, I don't know, I'm going to come back. Like, that's not who we want to be. We don't want to be the hovering sales associate. So I just really encourage people to think about, as they're building anything, like what equivalent experience can you imagine that would be like an in-person experience? And like, how would you treat that person and how would you want them to treat you? And like, what would that feel like? And like, what sorts of example, like what would you say? And then like, how do you then translate that into a digital or virtual or online experience? And that's a lot of what the course is about. It's also really like, humans are very predictable. And I find that very comforting personally. Some people, it freaks them out where they're like, well, no, like I have independent thought. And I'm like, yeah, that's cute, but like, not really, like there are literal like frameworks. There are patterns that humans follow. And it's not like we're like shooting in the dark every time, not knowing what's going to push people one way or the other. And so by learning those frameworks and like really being able to sort of almost academically identify them and name them and then deliberately design them and put them into experiences, you're just increasing your odds of success. And I think this is where the humanized piece gets a little tough. People get uncomfortable when you go from like, well, everybody's human, and like we got to talk about them like humans, but then I'm talking about how predictable they are and like how to get them to convert. And both things can exist. And then I think the thing that connects them is your values, and like are you doing right by them? Is this a good or like are you trying to dupe them, or are you like really trying to sell them something good? There's nothing wrong with selling something good to somebody who needs it. That's just an exchange of currency and value. That's what our world operates on. So I don't think it can be that sort of black and white, but I do think that by adding that psychological element in, we're a lot more honest about what we're doing, and we sort of are naming the feelings of our users and the mindsets, and it focuses, or it forces us to focus on diversity. It forces us to focus on the fact that not every user or every person that comes to a page is the same, right? Like you have to create experiences that make everyone feel safe when they get to that spot, or respected, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I'm clearly very passionate about this. I love talking about it. And I think that these worlds just don't intersect enough. And like, it's a little bit of the art and science for me, where it just feels so much more correct to me when we talk about both at the same time.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating. I took one psych class at Wake and kind of wish I did more of it. It's such an interesting,
Pick up a book.
I feel like, I know. Well, I might tune in for your class. And so when is your class going live? And is it a live or is it like a recorded?
So it is an exclusive with Reforge course, and it launches tomorrow. So I think enrollments are closed now.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually really nervous. It's so funny. I very rarely get imposter syndrome or like feel like, oh God, I don't know if I'm going to do a good job. There's something about teaching 50 people that is like, and these are like impressive. Like these are PMs at like Adobe and Microsoft shit. And like one girl's like figuring out how to build AI into Excel and like get people to, and I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I should be the one to tell you how to do this. So we'll see how it goes, but I think it'll be okay.
I'm sure you're going to crush it.
I'm going for like eccentric art teacher vibes for the product managers. I think that's my road to success here.
Yeah, love that. So yeah, one question, like how do you manage expectations with Mercury, your full-time employer, with like all these things going on? Because I think a lot of people are super interested in having like, I don't know if you call them side hustles, but like different things outside of work, like to have passion products and build your career portfolio. So how do you like manage those conversations?
Yeah. So I am incredibly lucky in that Mercury, first of all, I was already running OGC when Mercury hired me, and they hired me because of it in a lot of ways. So I'm lucky in that what I do outside of work is like fundamentally very helpful for what I do for Mercury. The more reps I get at creating community and the more testing and learning I can do, like objectively, I'm going to be much better at my job. That being said, though, not every company is even that understanding. Like, even if your work outside is helpful to your job, like a lot of companies just don't allow it. The first thing I would say is like read your employment contract really carefully. There are a lot of dicey words in there about side hustles and about income and things like that. Mercury is a bank, so I actually report everything, not only like side work that I do, but like they have all my investments. They have, because that's just required from working at a bank. But they do a really, really nice job of encouraging people to not feel limited by that regulation or by that like oversight. So again, I think I'm in a particularly advantageous situation where Mercury has been nothing but supportive. And, I think my advice would be, if you can build a really open, transparent relationship with your manager, with whoever, maybe it's HR, whoever it is at your organization, and just have the conversation, just ask. It's always better to ask and sort of talk about what you want to do and why you want to do it. Most people are really useful and nice and helpful and like understanding, and they'll try to find a way for you to do the things that you want to do. But it's definitely something like you have to respect. And if it isn't something that they're willing to support, then you have to make the decision of, is this the right place for me to be working full time? Do I want to commit myself completely to this other thing? Or do I want to do this other thing and try to find a second, another set of income to support it? So again, I wish I was like, I do feel like my relationship with Mercury is a bit of an outlier. I wish it wasn't the case, but I mean, I know a lot of companies that are really, supportive of this as well. Particularly, I mean, I think it's changed so much over the last few years where people just inevitably have side hustles because like layoffs are like imminent all the time.
Yes,
So it's like
literally. You're
they,
never safe.
the best advice I give people probably is like find your own income, like find a steady income, find something that you own. And maybe it's income, maybe it's like building your network or like any sort of investment in yourself. Because you just don't know, and when you work for somebody else, you are, subject to what happens at that company. But I do really believe that there are people at nearly every company now who have either experienced this themselves, or their partners are in that kind of position, or they've seen it, or whatever. It's just a very different time now. So I think my advice would be to just try and have the conversation, but don't do it behind your company's back. That is never the answer, and it will like not win you any points if they do find out, and then you have to kind of backpedal and try to have that arrangement.
I love that. And I think the advice of framing it in the sense of like, I'm like learning and testing these things with the OGC community, which then brings value to what you're doing at Mercury. So like showing them that.
Right. And maybe there is a different flavor of what you want to do that is supportive of your day job, but you're still learning the same things and sort of preparing yourself for 2 years down the road when you do launch that thing, for example. So, I think the other advice I would give, I'm 33, turning 34 in a couple of months. Like it's a long game in a lot of ways. I've been building my career for a decade, which makes me feel feel so old. But it takes that long to like really build out the relationships and the trust and know yourself well enough and know what you're good at. So light experimentation, I think, is great. Like, I think anytime you can just try some stuff without making it like a big thing. Like I started and stopped so many things in my life where I started it thinking I was going to love it. And then I just like hated it. And I was like, wait, why? And I'm so glad I didn't make like massive early jumps to do those things because they wouldn't have ended up being the right path for me.
I love making sure to remember it's a long-term career play because sometimes I feel like I can have the worst day or week and I'm like, you know what? There's so much time to play. We're going to figure this out. So good to always remember that.
That's the beauty of that like portfolio idea as well. Like your career is like very long. It's like 40 years long, like imagine all the things you're going to do and try. And so if you can at least pull them together under like a narrative and like make them feel like they build on each other, you're gonna have a lot easier time creating that kind of like personal brand and getting yourself to where you want to be. And so that's why I really like that mentality of like framing it. Because I think it's helpful when you think it's really hard to imagine 40 years worth of stuff. But if you're like, okay, I know that I care about this stuff, like I could imagine there's probably 10 or 15 versions of that I'll do in 40 years. It actually makes it feel much more like it makes it feel easier to conceptualize, I think, and work toward.
And then finally, where can people find you and everything that you're up to?
Let's see. LinkedIn is a good spot. I'm relatively active there. My website is MalloryContois.com and I keep that pretty updated. I just actually launched a newsletter. Another thing. I just launched a newsletter this week. And I'm really excited about it. I haven't done, a ton of promotion around it or anything because I'm kind of still figuring it out, but I would love if people would subscribe to that. It's about like having better small talk. So I fixate on weird things all the time. So I'm basically like, here's 5. Yeah. I'm like, here's 5 things you can talk about this week, like that are a little bit philosophical, like of the current moment. So you don't have to have this like boring ass small talk that you're definitely having. And I get to get my fixations like off my chest because this stuff is all I think about. So yeah, people can read that too. And then if they want to join OGC also, they can do that at jointheogc.com.
Amazing. Well, we'll get everything linked, obviously, in the show notes. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here. I learned a ton, and your experience is so cool and interesting, and love to hear kind of the different journeys and how everything connects.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was good to see you.